Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. So, get Brexit done is the refrain from Boris Johnson and every Conservative campaigning for him and his party. A powerful message designed to appeal to the people of the UK who are, let's face it, sick and tired of the process dragging on. It also takes advantage of a common fallacy that although you may have preferred leave or you may have preferred remain, that not much will change in people's lives either way. But although it's possible that other parties could get Brexit done well before the end of next year, Boris Johnson has absolutely no chance within the next Parliament even, and that's what I'd like to talk about here. But first, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So earlier this week, Boris Johnson said that he would begin trade talks from a place of perfect alignment and harmony, and that there was no reason why an agreement could not be reached by the end of next year, which of course is his deadline for the transition period. Now, both of these statements are not merely wrong, but deliberate lies designed to fool people into voting for a terminal and protracted Brexit over many more than simply another 2.5 years. His statement about the perfect alignment and harmony refers to the fact that, of course, as a member of the EU, we already follow most of the rules. Not all of them. We are a very naughty island nation, but most of them. But we do, as far as I know, follow all the rules necessary for smooth trade to continue. Otherwise, we'd have been taken to court a lot more often than we do. But there are a number of problems with this statement. So Boris Johnson doesn't want us to maintain this alignment and harmony. Alignment and harmony means that we continue to follow all EU rules and accept the jurisdiction of the EU courts when disputes arise. He doesn't put it in those terms because people would understand that, so he just talks about alignment and harmony. Johnson has explicitly stated that he doesn't want us to follow EU rules and he doesn't want us having to do what EU courts would tell us to do. Yes, he also explicitly stated that he would never agree to a border up the Irish Sea as well, but this one I think he means. Now, Sir Ivan Rogers is one of the few people in Britain who has ever conducted trade negotiations. And he put it fairly simply in a lecture last year. He said that trade agreements are usually negotiated by two parties who are converging. Ultimately, the time taken for the negotiations is in deciding where you're going to meet so that you can avoid costly delays in the transport of goods or whatever other cooperation you want to have. But the UK is diverging from the EU, moving apart. The problem with diverging, these are my words, not Sir Ivan's, is that you don't know where you're going to be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time or a generation's time. So this makes the process of negotiating a trade deal that is supposed to last a fair while much more complicated. And given that trade deals take years to form, you want it to last a while, don't you? And it's just going to make it impossibly complicated. And given that trade deals tend to take 4 years at least for parties that are converging, it can't possibly take less time for parties diverging. And this isn't a case of whose word do you believe. Sir Ivan has conducted trade negotiations. The only negotiations Boris Johnson has ever taken part in is in persuading the Iranian authorities to release a woman with joint British citizenship from Iranian custody on trumped-up charges. That she is still in prison and suffering badly years later tells you all you need to know about his negotiating abilities. In fact, as a result of his powers of persuasion, she was actually jailed for longer than originally planned. Of course, the problem here is that everyone has heard of Boris Johnson and knows what he's been saying about Brexit. Very few people have heard of Sir Ivan Rogers, and fewer still know that he's been saying anything on the subject, much less what he's said. In fact, the bulk of voters have not listened to the words of a single person who actually has experience of trade agreements. In addition, as I've said on several occasions before, the EU is the biggest and most powerful trading bloc in the world. The negotiators are extremely well practiced at getting the best deals for their members, which currently includes us. They've also been preparing. We have not. We are on our third Prime Minister since the referendum. The EU have been planning their negotiating stance from day one. And it's also known that their negotiators have been told to take a hard line. It's obvious enough, really. There are two compelling reasons to be tough with the UK. The first one is economic. The UK is going to suffer much more than the EU, and so the EU are in a stronger position. The EU is half our trade, and when you take into account other markets that the EU has trade agreements with, much more. The UK is about 6% of EU trade. It's obvious who holds the cards, really. And the second one, of course, is political. The EU doesn't intend to shoot itself in the foot by making it appear that you can just leave and then function perfectly well independently. For the EU project to succeed, the UK's decision has to be shown to be foolish. In other words, the UK has to fail. And when all those Brexiteers cry foul about, how mean the EU is being during these negotiations, there's no need for them to take that stance. People should remind them who it was that decided that we should become their opponents instead of remaining valued partners. Certainly wasn't me. The Financial Times had a bloody good quote from an EU diplomat on the subject. He said, "What is going to come is going to be much more challenging and demanding than what we have seen up to now. I would not wish negotiating a trade deal with the EU on anybody. It's the worst thing that can happen to you, especially if your administration doesn't have any experience negotiating trade issues." Right. So, to explain that, there are three things to consider, aren't there? One, as I've already noted, the EU are demonstrably really good at negotiating trade deals, and they've been planning these ones for years. We haven't. Two, we don't have a negotiating team in Britain at all. Remember that we haven't conducted trade negotiations for 2 generations. Sure, some EU negotiators are British, but only a small number. We don't have enough for a full team. And think about this, we don't just have to negotiate with the EU, we need to negotiate with everyone around the world. We don't even have one negotiating team. How are we going to manage that? So not only do we not have a sufficiently experienced negotiating team, we don't have a team at all. 3, each individual member state can veto anything in the eventual trade deal. Anything they don't like, they can say no to. And this can happen at any time. So we're not just negotiating with the EU team, but having to persuade each and every single member state. Now, that includes Spain, who want Gibraltar, France, who want fishing rights, and the Republic of Ireland, who want Johnson to disappear up his own arsehole. And Boris Johnson thinks he can arrange a trade deal under these circumstances in less than a year. More to the point, do you believe that? And then there is the time constraints. So Boris Johnson has given himself 1 year to get this done, if we are generous enough to believe that he really does want a deal. Now, the EU are not working to that timetable. That's Johnson's schedule, not theirs. With the withdrawal agreement negotiations, then yes, you could say they were working to a timetable because that was laid out in Article 50. Yes, it could be extended, but it's set 2 years. So they were working to a timetable there. Here they're not. There is no timetable for trade negotiations. They're done when they're done. So they know how long trade negotiations take. They're in no rush to get it completed by a certain date. Yes, they'll want it completed, but with the best deal for them. If Boris Johnson ever feels the pressure of his own self-inflicted schedule, it will be he that has to make concessions that screw the rest of us over. The EU team will simply sit there at the table, smiling politely, and insisting that we follow all their rules and accept their court's jurisdiction. In fact, everything that comes with being a member, only the UK won't have a say at that table. The EU have already said that they believe a deal can be done quickly, if the UK agrees to EU rules. So their negotiating position isn't speculation on my part, they've made it quite clear what they expect. So this means that Boris Johnson intends to screw someone over. If he's genuine about diverging standards with the EU, then he can't possibly get his trade deal because the EU will never accept that. So he'll be screwing all of us over because we'll end up with the no-deal Brexit that his billionaire backers want. Or, if he means it about the alignment and harmony, then he's intending to lock us into following all EU rules, or at least the ones related to whatever agreement is, certainly trade, probably other areas of cooperation like security as well, in which case he's technically screwing everyone over. He's screwing Leave supporters over because, well, that's not what they were expecting. But he's also screwing Remainers over because although it will prevent the worst harm, and is therefore much more welcome than a no-deal Brexit, it still means leaving and therefore not having a say in the largest trading bloc in the world, which still causes us damage, because that means rules have been made up that we have to follow that we don't set. So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, please. If you'd like to support the channel further, then also please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.